And so, I'm grateful for you being here for this year's first installment of our Jesuit Speaker Series, and I'm very grateful to Father Jeff Johnson for joining us tonight and putting time into preparing his remarks. You've seen it, I think, in our promotions, but the title of his talk is, Does ChatGPT Dream of Electric Teachers? Subtitle, Artificial Intelligence, Jesuit Education, and the Incarnation. Let me tell you a little bit about our speaker this evening. He is a former lieutenant in the United States Navy who served on the warship USS Farron in a variety of capacities as a navigator and a combat systems officer. He was an executive producer and writer at a film company named Fourth Week Films. He's a former teacher of English at Jesuit High School in Tampa. He's the former assistant pastor at Immaculate Conception Jesuit Church in New Orleans. He also taught English at Straight Jesuit College Preparatory, the Jesuit High School of Houston, Texas, where our own local superior of the Jesuits in Kansas City, Father Derek Weingartner, there in the back, is a proud graduate of Straight Jesuit. Round of applause seems appropriate. And since 2016, Father Johnson has been the president of Straight Jesuit College Prep in Houston. He has a Bachelor of Arts from Vanderbilt in English. He has a graduate studies in philosophy and theology from the University of St. Mary on the Lake or Mundelein Seminary in Chicago, a master's in English from Fordham University, and a license in sacred theology from Boston College, with his thesis being Finding God in Literary Realism, Balthasar, Auerbach, Lynch, and the Theology of Prose. So like most Jesuits I know, he's highly educated and with a variety of experiences, and it is my privilege to introduce to you tonight our speaker, Father Jeff Johnson.
Well, with all that education, this is guaranteed to be boring. Thank you, Dave. So bear with me for a little while. I'm going to go to great lengths to argue for something that most people here already know. And as I go through all of this, you might wonder, when is he going to get to the AI part? And when is he going to get to the Jesuit spirituality part? Fair warning, there's a lot of build-up. One more warning, I don't think that I've ever given an hour-long talk before, but no worries. A student the other day after Mass, an all-school Mass, told me that my homily felt like an hour. But thanks again to Dave for the invitation. Dave has been a very helpful mentor to me. When I started in 2016 at Straight Jesuit as president, I went and spent about a week with him at St. Louis University High School, just shadowing him, following him, learning from him, and I'm still learning from you. Thank you very much. So, as advertised, this is a talk about artificial intelligence and its impact on Jesuit Catholic education. But if you're expecting to hear details about how to use AI to create a great lesson plan or how to defend against cheating with AI, then I beg your forgiveness. It's not that kind of talk. If you're expecting to hear suggestions for your prayer at the end of the day today, then I must beg your forgiveness again. It's not that kind of talk either. In my role as president of a Jesuit Catholic school, I'm always thinking about mission. And sorry for all of the Straight Jesuit green branding, but you're just going to have to put up with it. I'm proudly obsessed with mission. And as you well know, schools thrive, like this one, when the mission is clear and when that mission infiltrates every aspect of the school. We're very fortunate at Jesuit Catholic schools. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to chase after the latest educational fads or look in jealous wonderment at other schools. We do our mission best when, with obsessive focus, we we form students in a way that begins and ends with our understanding of God and our understanding of God's most beautiful, amazing creation, us. In our school, our mission, and I'm sure it is here too, I know it is here too, our mission is often summarized by the phrase, men for others. It's a great slogan, but at last, it's not really our mission. It's really a partial formulation of our mission. I got some problems with the statement. Its focus is on man and woman rather than God. Pedro Arube's actual quote, as you know, he said, "We are called to form men and women for others, men and women who will live not for themselves, but for God and for His Christ." I know, again, I'm preaching to the choir. So tonight, AI is sort of my jumping off point for a wide-ranging reflection on what it means to be a human in relationship with God, and how Jesuit Catholic education can help people grow as men and women called by God for God's work. So, if you take nothing away from this talk, except one thing, I hope it's this. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of AI. Don't be afraid of anything, because that's what Jesus said. So I hope when you leave, you have an increased confidence in humanity and a decreased fear about our future. As Dave mentioned, just one other caveat. I have a master's degree in English with an emphasis on creative writing, poetry in particular. So if this talk doesn't make any sense, just pretend it's a poem. Poetry rarely makes sense. So here we go. Back when I came up with the subject of this talk, newspapers were filled with headlines about the existential threat of artificial intelligence. People were imagining a terrifying future where artificial intelligence becomes able to think and, more ominously, to do for itself, independent of human control. It would take over. One group of scientists just this past spring signed a petition saying that the threat from AI is even more serious than that of nuclear warfare or climate change. The breathless, anxious headlines have abated a little bit. They've been actually pushed out of the newspaper by the election. But the fear is still there. The fear of AI in general is still there. Because it's not really a new fear. It's a fear that's been around for a very, very long time. And the fear that we experience around the real or imagined threat of AI is not new. So as a way to get into this, I'd like to talk about two very ancient fears that wax and wane over the time, over the generations, over the ages. But right now, these two fears are at an all-time high. But don't be afraid of it. But they're at an all-time high. The fear of extinction and the fear of exploitation. This fear of smart machines that take over the world and eventually subjugate or exterminate the human species was the plot of a play that you may or may not be familiar with. It's similar to the plot of movies like Blade Runner and The Matrix. And I'm, of course, talking about the 1920 play, Rossum's Universal Robots, by the Czech playwright Karel Čapek, in which the robots, which look just like human beings, and are happy for a while to serve human beings every whim, until they're not. And these machines become independently sentient, and they rise up and destroy the human race. That was 1920. Since then, several movies have been inspired by this play. In fact, the word robot was coined by this playwright. And of course, Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, written 100 years before that, is a sort of foreshadowing of this plot. Technology run amok in the world. But the oldest example of this theme in literature might be the myth of Prometheus, in which technology, the technology of fire, is shared with humans by Prometheus, causing all sorts of problems for the gods. The gods did not like to be annoyed. In fact, the subtitle of Frankenstein is The Modern Prometheus. The point is, we like as human beings to imagine that our anxieties, our fears are fresh and new and unique to our generation, but they are not. Most of our terror is recycled. Personally, my favorite retelling of this cautionary tale of technology running amok is Blade Runner from 1982. Starring Harrison Ford, Ford's character, a law enforcement agent, is tasked with hunting down replicants, that is robots, who, after staging a revolution on Earth, are exiled to another planet. Now, they're not happy on the other planet, so a few brave replicants, I almost said souls, a few brave replicants band together and return secretly to Earth to stage yet another revolution. So Ford's character has to go and hunt down these robots who illegally return to Earth to cause havoc. And as you will remember, the replicants are very convincingly human in appearance, deep fakes. Blade Runner plays on humanity's age-old anxiety and fear of extinction. And this fear of extinction runs deep. It's very old. Think of the story of Noah and the Ark based upon the even older story of Gilgamesh, about a flood destroying humanity. Or think of the plot of almost every Marvel movie. Evil force comes to destroy the planet, this time Magneto. Superheroes come to save the planet, but only after lots of fireballs and destruction. Deep down, we fear extinction. We're petrified by it. We also fear exploitation. Many people love another movie, The Matrix, from 1999. As you will remember, a hacker named Neo discovers that the reality that he knows, all of this around us, this is all really just a simulation made by a computer that is subjugating humanity. This popular movie combines the Czech playwright Čapek's tale of robots taking over with a very particular misinterpretation of the philosopher Plato's allegory of the cave. Unlike Čapek's play, The Matrix doesn't just wonder what might happen if the machines take over. It poses a different question. What if they have already taken over? We just don't know it right now. That movie, when it came out, freaked out everybody. Oh my gosh. I remember kids in classes were like, how do we know this is any of this is real? I don't know. If Blade Runner explores our fears of extinction, The Matrix is highlighting our fear of exploitation by some mysterious invisible cabal. This fear of exploitation and subjugation by mysterious and hidden power is nearly as ancient as our fear of extinction. Think of the mythic stories of the three fates, goddesses who control behind the scenes the destiny of every human being from birth until death. The fates aren't sinister, but if you read the Da Vinci Code, the Illuminati are a sinister group running things behind the scenes invisible to us. Same with nearly every James Bond villain. lurking in an island cave or on a Caribbean hideout. So these are two very deep and ancient fears buried within the human psyche. The fear that we will be wiped out and the fear that we are being controlled right now, or used right now, or victimized. So artificial intelligence is scaring us out of our minds on these two accounts. Fear of being exterminated, fear of unknowingly being manipulated. I think, at the end of the day, these are irrational fears that are flourishing right now in America. This AI is just one example. Should we be careful with AI? Of course. But should we be afraid of it? Not at all. Definitely not. Let's not be afraid of AI, but instead investigate. What's making it possible for us to be so afraid of our extinction, so afraid of being manipulated by somebody else? In other words, our fear of AI tells us a lot about what's going on in a broader sense within the human mind and spirit right now. It's a huge problem, these fears running amok. And a Jesuit Catholic school has a critical role to play. Oh, before we get to the school part, if you don't think these two fears are running amok and having their way with us, just turn on the television. Both political parties are saying that if the other party wins, life as we know it is over. And both political parties are saying you can't trust the other one deep down. If the other one is up to no good and they're lying about what they really want to do. They have ulterior and hidden motives to manipulate people to their way of thinking. Both parties right now are stoking these twin ancient fears, then presenting themselves as the answer to these ancient problems. So, what's happened that we are so susceptible right now to these two fears, and what's a Catholic high school to do about it? A couple of things have happened over the past 150 years or so on the intellectual level that have made it possible for these two fears to become particularly acute. Essentially, rampant relativism has weakened our institutions, opening the door to wild conjecturing about what's really going on, conspiracy theories. So I'll see if I can explain. The idea of relativism, which you're probably familiar with, challenges the existence of this idea of an objective, universal truth that we can all know. And this relativism can be traced back pretty far, but mainly to the 18th century, to the philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant's philosophy fundamentally questioned whether human beings could truly know reality as it is, suggesting that our perception of the world is filtered through our subjective experience. And this was a radical departure from the classical notion that truth was something objective and accessible to reason. It could be understood, and not just understood by me or you, but by everybody. Building on this foundation, philosophers like Nietzsche pushed the concept further, famously declaring God as dead. That's a metaphor for the collapse of traditional absolute values. Nietzsche, though, took it a little bit further, saying there are no facts. There are only interpretations. He believed that what we call truth was simply a construct of power used to maintain control over society. For example, Nietzsche thought that virtues like humility and self-sacrifice were really just things made up by weak people to stifle the powerful people and keep the powerful people down. And since there are more weak people than there are powerful, they got to set the agenda. By the time we reached the 20th century, especially in the 70s and 80s, these ideas have taken hold in many American universities. As you know, many academics preach a gospel of relativism, rejecting the notion of universal truth. in favor of the idea that truth is really just up to you. It's subjective. It's shaped by culture, by language, by power. Postmodern thinkers challenge everything, from morality to science, arguing that what we call truth it's just an invention. It's a narrative, it's a story that we use to control and manipulate people. I have my truth as I know it, you have your truth as you know it. The two truths might conflict with one another, mine versus yours. But whoever's truth is more persuasive to the mass of people, that person will win the day. This intellectual shift towards relativism, where there are no facts but only interpretations, has seriously undermined the authority of institutions. Institutions that had traditionally been entrusted with discovering and safeguarding and handing on the truth. Institutions like universities themselves. If you don't think they're in crisis, turn on the news. Other institutions that made claims to objective truth, standards, and morality came under attack as well. Now we hear that the biological fact of man and woman is actually an oppressive narrative meant to keep in check those who are different. So that's the first concept that has set the stage for and made our fears, I guess, more heightened. The infiltration of relativism into popular ways of thinking has exacerbated. And if there's no such thing as truth, just narratives and stories and power dynamics, well then who's really in charge? Hang on a second. Should have unscrewed this. As institutions weakened under the influence of relativism, so too did society's trust in these institutions. If there's no such thing as objective truth, then why should we trust experts? Okay, your expert says this, my expert says that. Let's let them battle it out. There's no such thing as truth. Why should we trust academics and the institutions that claim to pursue truth? So this, as I said, this erosion of trust laid fertile ground for the rise of conspiracy theories as people began to question whether any institution could really truly reveal the nature of reality. These institutions became more susceptible to the idea that hidden forces were controlling everything behind the scenes. The philosopher Plato has a way of describing what's really going on. He used the example of people inside a cave to explain this. He wrote this in the Republic about 400 years before Christ. And Plato's allegory of the cave describes a group of people who've been imprisoned in a dark cave since birth, chained in such a way that they can only see the wall in front of them. And then behind them, a fire burns, and objects are moved in front of the fire, casting shadows on the wall. Now these prisoners have been there their whole life. This is all they know. And these prisoners mistake these shadows for reality, the real thing, because they've never seen anything else. Well, eventually one prisoner is freed or frees himself, and he goes out up to the top, out of the cave, to the real world. Realizing, oh my gosh, the shadows on the wall, that's just a shadow of a stick figure of a tree. He gets up there and says, no, I've seen a real tree. And it's not that. He experiences the sun, which represents truth and knowledge, and understands the true nature of reality. So then he comes back to the cave to enlighten the others. They reject his revelations, preferring the familiar shadows over the uncomfortable truth. This interpretation of the allegory of the cave can help us understand the two factors that I'm describing, relativism and conspiratorial thinking. So when the escaped prisoner returns to tell people the truth, they probably say things to him like, "Well, that's your opinion." "Yeah, okay, you say you saw a tree out there. That's your opinion. That's great. You can't prove it. That's your truth from your perspective." Objective truth has become such a mistrusted concept that even during COVID, we were told by some people to follow the science, while at other times, by the very same people, we're told that science is just a tool of powerful manipulation. Looked at in another way, the allegory of the cave also explains conspiratorial thinking. Someone unseen, these people back here in the hooded things with the sticks that they can't even see, someone unseen is controlling everything, controlling what I see, controlling what I know. They are in charge. Oh, by the way, they is one of my favorite words at a high school. You know, if something bad goes on or some kid has a miserable day, why did they make us do that? They. The ones who turn around and see what's really going on claim to have a special understanding. It's available only to a few people. Oh, the conspiracy theorists. I know what's really going on. I know. No, not many people know. Not many people can understand, but I do. There's tons of examples of this out there. So there's a strong connection and correlation between relativism, no such thing as the objective truth, and increased belief in wild, unproven conspiracy theories. It's even impacting our understanding of history. As people go and look at history again and say, yeah, that didn't really happen that way. The number one way a Jesuit school can combat both of these fears is by teaching its students that there is such a thing as truth. It's universal, it's intelligible, and most importantly, it's compassionate. That's right, it's compassionate. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In a world awash in relativism, conspiracies, and general distrust of our neighbor, this good news is very welcome. Now, sadly, Catholics and Christians, especially in this country, have let themselves get caught up in the culture wars, mistaking certain political stances for the latest secular narrative for the gospel. But in a world ravaged by relativistic thinking, it's hard to make objective truth claims. So I would propose putting our narrative up against theirs. The story of Jesus, helpfully told 4 times. It's almost as if God knew that a strong narrative would be needed. A Jesuit Catholic school can help by ensuring it tells the story of Jesus and stays focused on asking at all times, what, God, are you inviting us to do? But because we are a Jesuit school, there must be an intellectual component to this. We are, after all, talking about the truth. So let's just briefly take one more look at Plato's cave, and perhaps another way of looking at the cave, and truth and knowledge. Coming to know truth in a way that is a journey. Different picture, a little brighter. It's still the cave. You still got people chained to the wall, the shadows, the dark figures there. The exit, the Revelation. In this interpretation, the figures on the roadway carrying the puppets can be seen as part of the broader process of knowledge and understanding. They're not up to anything bad. Rather than misleading the prisoners, these figures could just represent the stages of learning, the various influences that shape our understanding of reality. The shadows on the wall, while not the ultimate truth, are part of a journey towards a greater understanding. You start understanding simply, and then you progress. Oh, wow, okay, I understand a little bit more. And then even more. Oh, now I get it. When I came to your office in St. Louis in 2016, I kind of thought I knew what being a president meant. Now, after 8 years, I think I know better. Hopefully. This perspective suggests that the process of coming to the truth is gradual and involves moving from limited, partial understandings to more complete and accurate ones. The figures on the roadway are not malicious manipulators. They're just symbols of incomplete, the evolving nature of human knowledge. They play an important role in the prisoner's eventual journey towards enlightenment, even if the shadows they cast are maybe a little imperfect. In this view, the cave allegory underscores the idea that knowledge is not simply about immediately grasping the truth, but about progressing through various stages of understanding. The journey out of the cave represents the intellectual and philosophical struggle to move from ignorance to understanding, acknowledging that each step is hard. You gotta go up. So a Jesuit Catholic education takes students on a journey from ignorance, and I don't say that word judgmentally. They are, especially the sophomores. It takes students on a journey from ignorance to knowledge, and that process is iterative and ongoing for their whole life. We teach them not just stuff, we teach them how to learn and how to go on this journey of knowledge. It's just like their relationship with Christ. It's a journey. It starts in a childlike way, understanding God in a childlike way, as if God's some big Santa Claus type thing. But then as you grow older and you become an adult and your spirituality becomes more mature, it's a journey. And it's not a coincidence that the journey to knowledge looks a lot like the journey of the spirituality, of the spiritual journey. Because the goal is the same. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So our journey towards knowledge and our spiritual journey look and feel a lot like one another. Okay, now to sports. This is Matthew Bowling.
You have to tell them a little bit more about Matthew, Father, I think, in case they don't know.
Oh, come on. Really? Okay, Matthew Bowling graduated from Straight Jesuit in 2019, and he is the national record holder in the 100-meter race with a 9.98. And he went viral after doing that. And he graduated from the University of Georgia last year and won a gold medal at the World Championships in Hungary last summer. He missed the Olympics by just a hair, but very nice kid. This is our baseball team from 2020. They went to the state Final Four, and this was their celebration when they won the region and were headed to the state. It's just a little interlude with some pictures. And universal truths. Now this, it might be a stretch. Football is one way of teaching the concept of universal truth. Think about it. You don't get to be in charge of the rules. You don't make up new rules in the middle of the game. You're not allowed to feel slighted by the rules. What do you mean 10 yards? And you gotta get 10 yards. The rules exist outside of the game and are enforced by an authority that is outside the game, the referees. The referees are not playing the game. Do you think it's any wonder that violence and shouting against referees is on the increase in a world that no longer believes in the truth and suspects manipulation and exploitation behind every corner? That's the toughest $75 you can make right now, is being a ref at a high school sporting event. Football, at least at a Jesuit school, is merely one tool alongside many other tools available to us in the formation of young men. Not only will they learn about rules and reality, they will also learn forgiveness, teamwork, determination, how to develop a skill that they have. They learn to be coachable, hopefully, humble. Football, like many other team and individual sports, is an effective tool in a high school. Because if kids are having fun, then you can teach them stuff. But as anyone who's played can tell you, it's sometimes very, very challenging. And I think a challenge met together will teach kids even more than merely having fun. If it was just about fun, we could form these kids with an iPad and Brawl Stars. iPads are important. They're a good tool. I would hope that at a Jesuit school, that if football ever became an ineffective tool in the formation of young men, that we would have the courage to say, okay, well, just like the slide rule, we don't use that anymore. We don't use football as a tool anymore. And we get rid of it, and we move on to an even better tool. Humans have always had a love-hate relationship with technology. As I mentioned earlier, Prometheus, one of the Greek gods, was punished by Zeus for having given fire to humans. Zeus tied him to a rock, and for eternity, a large bird ate his immortal liver, which kept regenerating itself. Zeus was mad because it made the humans more powerful. They had fire now, and more annoying. And the gods did not like to be annoyed. Mercifully, our God enjoys being annoyed. The humans could use fire as a weapon against each other and cause all sorts of ruckus, again, annoying the gods. Artificial intelligence is just a tool, like any other tool. It can be used for good or bad. It doesn't really contain within itself a predilection for one or the other. So I'm going to look at 3 tools in particular. You might have thought I was kidding, but I am going to cover the history of rope. Knives, ropes, and pesticide. So which came first? Humanity's control of fire or the invention of a knife or a cutting tool? Anyone? Fire or a cutting tool? Yeah. As a tool, you really can't get better than a knife. They are so readily at hand that we really don't even think about them anymore. However, according to archaeologists, cutting tools and knives were critically important to the very development of the human species. A lot is made of the discovery of fire, but the knife is probably more important. The oldest knives ever found by archaeologists are actually primitive stone tools known as Oldowan tools, which date back to about 2.5 million years ago. These tools were discovered at sites in East Africa, and our use of fire only dates back about 1 million years. So knives are much, much older. Knives and cutting tools. Here are just a few examples of how these knives and scraping tools changed humans. First, better nutrition led to bigger brains. Knives allowed early humans to efficiently butcher animals, cutting through tougher hides, tougher meat. This enabled them to access a more diverse range of nutrients, including proteins and fats, which were essential for brain development and overall health. Over time, better brain development led to larger brains. Knives were also used to cut and process plant materials, making it easier to harvest and prepare a variety of edible plants. This contributed to a more balanced diet. Without the knife, we would probably still be living in caves without fire. Because the control and effective use of fire by humans required bigger brains, better decision making, better planning. We got fire, what are we going to do with it? Secondly, division of labor. The use of knives and other tools likely contributed to the division of labor within early human communities. Different individuals specializing in hunting some specialized in tool making, some specialized in the butchering of the meat. This specialization could have led to more complex social structures. As tools also became more sophisticated, early humans may have begun trading knives and other valuable tools, fostering early forms of trade and exchange between groups. If the knife had not been invented, one could argue that we would not have democracy, a very complex social structure. The oldest archaeological evidence of a murder by a knife dates back to around 430,000 years ago, during the Middle Pleistocene era. The evidence was found in the Cima de los Huesos pit of bones site in Spain. And it's not definitively clear that the murder at the site was caused by a knife, but the evidence here strongly suggests that a sharp object, such as a stone tool, was used. The skull shows 2 penetrating injuries on the frontal bone that were likely inflicted by a sharp, pointed instrument. Now, while the exact nature of the tool can't be confirmed, it is probably an early knife. I wonder if at the time, was there a pro-life group around that advocated for controls on knives, even the prohibition of knives? We can't have these knives around, they're too dangerous. If there was, I'm sure that there was a very active and very well-armed counterfaction, the pro-knifers. I could do the same thing with rope or clothing. But the archaeological evidence for both is pretty misleading. Rope and clothing were made from plant and animal fibers, and those were lost very quickly from the archaeological storehouse of evidence. But it's believed that the first rope was used around 20,000 years ago, well after knives and fire. And that the first clothing was most likely used between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago. That's a big, wide range. And I'm going to pass up the joke about, what were they doing before the invention of clothing? The first archaeological evidence of someone being hanged with a rope is from the 18th dynasty of Egypt, around 1500 BC. When rope was invented, was there a group of people who called for its prohibition? Maybe. But thank goodness they did not prevail. Because without the invention of rope, a tool that allows for the distribution and redirection of force using a lightweight, high tensile strength material, we most likely would not be sitting here today. Because sailing would have been very difficult without rope. You can't really talk about sailing without talking about rats. Did you know that if one pregnant rat is put on a 4 square mile ratless island, that island will be overrun with rats in less than 2 years? Rats are prolific breeders, and they began hopping on ships as soon as people began traveling by ship. They went everywhere and caused great damage, not just to the people on the ship through disease and spoilage of food, but damage to native habitats. Rats can and have killed coral reefs. How does a rat kill a coral reef? Well, in the case of the island of Palmyra in the Pacific Ocean, until the 1950s, Palmyra was uninhabited. During the Second World War, the island was used as a base, a military base. And with humans came rats. The rats ate the eggs of the native seabirds. These same seabirds would forage and feed from the ocean and from other islands, bringing in their poop, much needed nutrients. So when the seabird population decreased, the new nutrients from off-island decreased. And the rats only pooped out what was already there. There was no new source of nutrients. So these missing nutrients that had once filtered through the soil and into the ocean and fed the coral reefs were gone. So in this way, rats killed the reefs. Well, to prevent the spread of disease and to control the unwanted migration of rats, sailors have been trying to keep rats off ships from the beginning. This is a rat guard that goes over the rope, the line that secures the ship. It's meant to keep rats from getting onto the ship, but equally meant to keep them from getting off the ship. In the late 1800s, when ships were growing larger and larger, the rat problem grew as well. When a large ocean-going ship returned to port, it was very common to seal up the ship until it was airtight, and then fumigate it with a very powerful pesticide, killing rats as well as other pests, lice, fleas. A German company, AMDG, developed a very, very effective pesticide for the purpose of fumigating ships to kill rats. It was so effective that when the Nazis started describing Jews as vermin and comparing them to rats, the Nazis began to plan for their extermination, as you would exterminate any horde of unwelcome rats. The gaseous product, Zyklon B, was used to exterminate millions of Jews in death camps throughout Europe. The Nazis were relativists, and they trafficked in horrific conspiracy theories about what's really going on. According to them, Jews were supposedly running and ruining the world. Claudia Kuntz, an historian and author of The Nazi Conscience, argues that Germans didn't become Nazis because they were anti-Semites. They became anti-Semites because they were Nazis. In other words, if you don't believe in objective truth, and you start believing conspiracy theories, you open yourself up to lots of outrageous and dangerous stuff. And both of our political parties have started trafficking in the demonization of their enemies, and we should be very, very careful. Well, I'm pretty far from my starting point, and maybe I'm belaboring the points about relativism, conspiracy theories, and tools. But AI is a tool, just like any other tool. At this point, everything is going to have some AI component. I was hooking up a new microwave that we bought at the Jesuit residence in Houston, and it asked if I wanted to hook up my phone to it. And so I did, of course, over Wi-Fi. And then I was in my office and I got a notification that someone had just finished defrosting something. What in the world are we doing? Okay, everything's going to have AI. Over the past year, we've seen AI get put into just about everything. And we have seen near panic about it taking over the world. It's just a tool. And actually, about a month ago, a bunch of scientists, you can believe scientists, came out and said it would be impossible for ChatGPT to become sentient and take over. That's another talk. It's just a tool. It's like a knife or a rope. So when I say AI, I mean specifically, like ChatGPT, large language models, and other things like it. They're very powerful tools. ChatGPT is trained on a vast amount of text data. It's basically read every book that's ever been written, and can put those books in conversation with one another. Large language models can answer questions, write essays, summarize content, generate creative writing, and even engage in conversation, making them versatile tools in various applications. It wrote that sentence, but not the rest of it all. They even make images, such as this one. Basically, as I said, ChatGPT knows everything ever written, and then it can engage in a conversation about anything. I find myself using it all the time, and increasingly so. And here are some recent examples of my own use of ChatGPT. created a debate between two experts over whether to remove moldy drywall or to clean and sanitize the drywall. We had a little flood thing at the school. Explain to an amateur why a chill water plant is more efficient than rooftop AC units. How would you go about designing a sound system for a 2,500-seat basketball gym that also serves as a worship space for Catholic masses? Using Catholic moral theology, can you tell me why it's okay to go to a Major League Baseball game if that team or the league might support or believe in things contrary to Catholic teaching? I got a phone call. If I'm 54 years old, what percentage of my life is one day? I just wanted to know. And I did it. It's 0.00507% of my life today. We're doing on time. Oh, we're good. Okay. Yeah. This is a little video. I'm not going to show it. Between Paul Solman from the PBS NewsHour talking to a robot that's informed by or uses ChatGPT. It's pretty incredible. He's a New Yorker, has a real fast accent, way of talking, and he makes no concessions for talking to it, just rattles off a question, and the thing answers back in a very, very meaningful way. One of the chief fears, at school in Houston, we're taking AI very seriously. It's been addressed in the School Affairs Committee of the Board of Directors and at a board meeting last spring. Our faculty has spent time in their departments and larger venues brainstorming about AI in the classroom. We're approaching it with openness and excitement, all the while being grounded in our Christian understanding of the human person and what we're trying to do. We're open to just about any tool that helps us form the human person in such a way that he can answer God's invitation. But let me suggest two theological reasons quickly why teachers cannot and should not be replaced by machines. The first argument is more general. Why it would not be advisable to have machines replace work at all. And the second is more specific to teaching. First, work is fundamental to what it means to be human, especially when that work is creative and brings about the advancement of the common good. We're made in God's image. We become more fully ourselves when we, like God, create. Whether we're creating jobs, creating family, creating art. So long as our creativity, our work, aids in the advancement of the common good, we can be said to be co-creators alongside God, who's always creating the world anew. Of course, AI will be able to take away certain burdens, but it cannot replace the human and the divine act of creation. Machines, unlike ourselves, are not made in God's image. In his encyclical, St. John Paul II writes, work is a good thing for man, a good thing for his humanity, because through work, man not only transforms nature, adapting it to his own needs, but he also achieves fulfillment as a human being, and indeed, in a sense, becomes more of a human being. So if we were to let the computers take over and do everything, we just lay around on sofas, we'd be cheating ourselves of our humanity. Second, although elements of being human can be simulated by machines, the machine cannot take the place of a whole human person, especially the relational aspects of the human person. Humans are able to form relationships with one another, and these relationships are the place where we learn what's most important. A relationship, if it's formed well, can mean the difference between a kid thriving later in life or not. Teaching is more than just passing on information. It's a human relationship. If you're like me, I cannot recall the moment I learned the quadratic formula. But I do recall that Miss Nevins, my high school math teacher, that's Robert Webb, my high school math teacher, she was a very good person and good teacher. She had that magical combination of love and challenge. She taught with her whole self. She went beyond conveying information. And I can still remember the 6 of us in desks, pulled up around her big desk, marveling at her ability to teach 17-year-olds calculus. That's her. That's some of my classmates. I'm the pensive one on the left. Theologically speaking, though, there is something irreplaceable about the human relationship. Otherwise, God would not have incarnated himself through Jesus. Jesus, taking on human nature, made it possible for humans to have a relationship with God in a way that could not be simulated or replaced. Jesus becoming like us in all things except sin makes it possible for us to become like God. I'm confident that teachers cannot be replaced by machines because machines cannot develop the necessary relationships with students by which a special transformation takes place. Machines cannot form them from others. This can only be accomplished through a relationship with God, facilitated by relationships with the many loving human beings who work at this school and who understand that there is such a thing as truth, and who understand that God is victorious over evil and death, and we have nothing to be afraid of. One last example of what happens when we let our fear run rampant. The latest example of schools freaking out. In the span of a few months, there's a national craze regarding the banning of phones in school. Everyone, it seems, is doing it. Like lemmings to the cliff, schools are banning phones. One school leader compares giving phones to kids. One school leader compares giving phones to kids like giving cigarettes to kids. Here's what the head of an elite school in Washington, D.C. said about the phones. I believe that those who are responsible for the well-being of children can no longer ignore the reality that phones in schools are doing more harm than good, distracting students, isolating them, and creating unhealthy echo chambers that undermine critical thinking. I suspect that the phones are not what's causing this, any more so than the knife caused that murder in that cave 15,000 years ago, or that insecticide caused the Holocaust. So finally, popular culture, secular culture wants schools to be many things: career preparation, pipelines to elite colleges, daycare centers, athletic powerhouses, engines of social change. And sometimes Jesuit Catholic schools can be tempted to follow these paths and stray from their core mission, which is the formation of young people, grounded in the love and knowledge of God and Christ, done with great intellectual care, and in such a way that God receives the glory. In other words, when someone comes into contact with our schools, I want them coming away saying nothing other than, wow, God is good. God is good. So, in life and in the running of a school, let us never forget, to quote Dave Fleming, the goal of our life is to live with God forever. God who loves us gave us life. Our own responsive love allows God's life to flow into us without limit. All the things in this world are gifts of God presented to us so that we can know God more easily and make a return of love more readily. As a result, we appreciate and use all these gifts of God insofar as they help us develop as loving persons. But if any of these gifts becomes the center of our lives, they displace God and so hinder our growth toward our goal. In everyday life, then, we must hold ourselves in balance before all of these created gifts, insofar as we have a choice and are not bound by some obligation. We should not fix our desires on health or sickness, wealth or poverty, success or failure, a long life or a short one. But everything has the potential of calling forth in us a deeper response to our life in God. Our only desire and our one choice should be this: I want and I choose what better leads to God's deepening His life in me. Thank you all very much for your very kind attention. I'll be hanging around for a little bit. There's some cookies and water over there. But thank you all very much. You've got a very special place here. And I'm glad I can be here with you this evening.